Welcome to Inspired by Shar. Today I'm going to show you how to make a very unique star, which I have called Star Power. This pattern was first created in the late 30s by the Kansas City Star. It was published, and at that time they just called it a simple four-pointed star. You don't see this pattern very often because of the unique shapes that you see in it. It is actually intimidating to some people because of the Y seams that we're going to show you how to put together today in this pattern. We gave it the name Star Power because of all the possibilities that you can make with this pattern. I'm going to start out by taking you on a tour with some of the quilts. The first one that I'm showing you is right behind me. It's got just three main colors. The first color that I chose, you'll see a little bit of orange, yellow, purple, blue, and even a little bit of green. From this print, then I selected two more. You'll see a paler green, and then you'll see a real strong blue, which sets the stars from the rest of the fabrics. This one is just an overall four-pointed star, or one of the variations of Star Power. The next one that I'm showing you was created by Mona Barron. She did this pattern by fussy cutting some of the fabrics. It's from a very unique pattern, which I'll show you a little bit later, the fabric which we took it from. Each of the stars look different because of the way that we have cut them from the fabric. The next one that I'm showing you was created by Judy Block. Judy has done a great job using up all of her scraps. You'll see that she's used fabrics all with the same mood. They all came from the same time period. She has evenly distributed all the colors, and that's one thing that you want to do when you create your scrap version of this, is create it on a design wall so that you can equally distribute them. The next one that I'm going to show you is done by Sue Anderson. In this particular one, she has started out with a batik fabric, and she has fussy cut one of the blocks, or one of the corners I should say, of the block, and then the center star was an overall print which has a little purple actually, and the green and the darker blue, and then one of the stars is the green one. And you'll see that this one is different because it has two backgrounds, the green background as well as the blue. The next one was done by Judy Block, and that's our patriotic version of this design. She has two strong colors of blue and red, and the background has the overall star pattern which combines both the blue and the red in them. The next one is a table topper, also created by Judy Block. This one shows you how you can use just two fabrics to make this pattern. The background one has a little bit of the green and a rust in it, but it shows you what you can do with just two fabrics and create a very, very nice table topper. The next one that we're looking at was made by Jean Johnson, and that one has three blues in it. Again, by placing the colors so carefully, she's created again another variation of this design, and by placing the blocks real cleverly, she's created a very interesting table topper with it. You'll see that Jean has quilted some background stripes in the one pattern to make it look like there's rays in that pattern. The next one is the Christmas table runner, and this one I just used fat quarters to create this one. You could actually make it longer by just adding another block or two. And that's the crazy thing about this pattern, is that you can just make them longer, wider, just by the number of blocks that you keep on making. This one, I started out with the reds in the center, first placing them on the design wall, and then building the rest of the table runner with the greens and the background creamy plaid, which all came together very nicely to create this pattern. The last one in the variation today that I'm going to show you is one that's done by Donna Noyes. And this one, she was really clever when she picked the fabric. She first chose a large floral print when she was creating this pattern. And from that large floral print, she then selected the pinks, the greens, the golds, and the purples. They're all separated out with that creamy background. She actually took the time to hand quilt all of these and did just a meticulous job in putting the whole quilt together. The inside border then has a nice pink inside border, and then the outside border is her first fabric which she chose, which was the large floral print. These are the quilts that I'm going to show you how to make today, and you will agree that it's a wonderful, wonderful class because it's great for all skill levels. Beginners to advanced will enjoy playing with this pattern. So I think it's now time to start showing you how to cut the block. You're going to enjoy the tools that I've created for you to use. They are acrylic templates with a seam allowance included in them. Also, they're transparent so that you can do some fussy cutting if you want to, like we did in some of the patterns. The grain line is also etched into them, so you can make sure that you have them on the straight of grain when you're cutting. Then on the back side of the templates, I have added some quick grips, and they are there to help you when you're cutting so that they don't slide when you're cutting your pieces, allowing you to have a lot more accuracy in creating your quilt pattern. It comes complete with a 16-page book in full color from beginning to end. All of the illustrations are in great detail. It'll show you the right side and the wrong side of the blocks, as well as complete with yardage and everything that you need to know about each of the variations. It also has at the end of the book a color your own page where you can create your own Star Power block. I recommend washing your fabric before you cut it and making your quilt. You don't want to have the colors bleeding after you have the project completely finished. Then the next thing I do is I dry it in the dryer just like you would treat your fabric normally. After you have everything washed and dried, then I press it really well and make sure that you have all the wrinkles out of it. Then I fold it in half, matching the selvage edges so that it lays really nice and flat. Then I will bifold the fabric so everything fits up on top of the cutting board so that it doesn't get disturbed when I turn the board after I have straightened my fabric. So what I'm going to do first of all is place my ruler up on the folded fabric, and I line up the folded edge with the square edge of the ruler on the bottom end. Make sure everything is lined up. And then I like to use a small rotary cutter, and I always go backwards first when I cut. That way I don't have to worry about going into the end of the ruler and dulling my blade. And notice how I followed along with my hand so that the ruler didn't move. Then I turn the board completely around, and notice how my fabric didn't drag along and it didn't get disturbed. So I have this perfectly straight edge over here. Now I'm going to cut the first set of pieces from the B template, and I'll slide the ruler over and I'll line up the straightened cut edge with the 3 3/4 inch mark on the ruler. The other thing that I pay attention to is the straight of grain arrow that's on the template. That's how I know I'm cutting my strips in the right direction. Again, with the small rotary cutter, I go backwards first and then forward, and each time moving my hand along so that my ruler doesn't move as I'm cutting. Then after I have cut the strip, I like to move up onto a smaller rotating mat board, which makes it easier to cut than the pieces. So again, I will bifold the strips up on top of the rotating mat, and I will line up the straightened edge of the cut strip with the straightened edge of the template. And I'm going to make my first cut going this way, slide the fabric over just a little bit so I don't cut into it when I remove the ears. And look at how easy it is to follow along that shape. I now have perfectly cut shapes, and I'm on to making the star block. So I know that they are going to lay in that position just like they are in the finished block ahead of it. Now, to prevent from wasting fabric, I will lay that same template, butt it up to that first cut edge over here, and you want to make sure that you have it perfectly placed on the fabric. Remember that these templates are laser cut and computer drafted so that they're accurate to 1/10,000th of an inch, and you want to take advantage of that accuracy all the way through the cutting and sewing process of your block. And again, we'll just place them on the design wall. I always do all of my work from a design wall, and I'm able to stand back and see that I like the project that I'm working on. I won't have to cut any more of those pieces because you just repeat that same process over and over until you have enough for each of your blocks. It takes 8 of these pieces to create one 6-inch finished square. The next one that I'm going to show you how to cut, it's in the corner of the block, and it also fits in the center of the block. And that's what creates this unusual 4-pointed star. Ahead of time, I have cut the strip for this particular shape to save a little bit of time. And again, I will place the template up on top of that straightened edge of fabric, again paying attention to the straight of grain in the template, making sure that I have everything lined up perfectly. The first cut I make, I will go backwards, then come back onto the fabric and go forward. Then I will turn the board. See how nice those grips hold on so that the fabric doesn't move, and continue on. And then I have the star that sits in the center of the block. And I need 4 of those for each one of the squares. Then I will cut that one more time. And this time I'm going to lay, so see how I turned the template so that I wouldn't waste fabric. I'll just slide it over until I have a match of this cut edge and this cut edge. And then I will turn the mat and make sure that everything is perfect. And I'll cut this one off, and again this one. When I'm cutting for a scrap variation of this quilt, I will stack as many as 6 layers of fabric on top of each other, which really speeds up the process a lot. And that's the 4 points that make the center of the star. Isn't that great how the colors just glow in that block? Up above you'll see a completed square with then the same shape cut in the corner of the block. To make this variation of the star power, I'm going to show you how to do some fussy cutting from some very unique fabric. As you can see when you look at this quilt, there are 2 different stars in this particular variation. The fabric that I've chosen to work with, actually it was Mona's creation, was a fabric that looks like this, and you can see that there are separate blocks in it, and they have the effect of a kaleidoscope. When I first looked at this fabric, I thought, oh, I don't know, that's going to be kind of hard to work with. But when you do this technique, you'll see how creative you can be with the cutting. The first thing I'm going to do is, well, make sure that I don't have another layer of fabric underneath. I'm going to slice this fabric in the middle. So I'm going to lay the ruler and I'm going to line it up with 3 points on this fabric. I'm going to find the center point first, and then I'll find the 2 points on opposite sides, and I'm going to cut right through the center of the block. Then I'm going to turn the ruler in the other direction, do the same thing, and I'm going to line it up with this point over here, which is identical to the one across from it. And go through the center again. And right down the middle. Now I have dissected into 4 equal parts. So what I'm going to do is flip these back and just leave the one so that I can get at it and not cut into the others. And I'm going to line up the center part of the template, and again, this is the straight of grain right in here. Make sure I have it perfectly lined up, and I will make this cut first. And if you were at home, you would turn the board, but I'm going to cut backhanded, and I have my first perfect point to do this variation of the star power. I'm going to cut the next one, carefully following the edge of the template, making sure everything is perfectly cut. And there is the second one. See that design that's starting to follow in the center of the block? We'll continue on with 2 more of those, and we'll have the center of our block completely cut. One more time. It's so nice to follow the edge of the template, and you have the accuracy that you've never enjoyed before. And the last one is just a repeat of what we've already done. And I have 1 more star, just like that. Isn't that pretty? Now you don't have to waste the fabric that came out of this part. You can now lay this template up on top of here and create another star if you want to. Just choose an area on that fabric and cut from all 4 corners, and you'll have another star variation, just taking advantage of the leftover fabric. And that's how you can create all the different variations when you fussy cut. The first thing I want you to do before you start sewing is set your machine for the perfect scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. That can be done in many different ways, but the way I'm going to show you will make it easier for you. What I do is I line up the shape in the back of the book. The graphics have the actual shape of the template with the perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance. What I'm going to show you how to do is to line up the edge of your foot with the outside line on the shape, and I want you to move your needle position so that it pierces just outside that dashed line. That will be considered your scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. So again, we will line up the edge of the foot with the edge of the presser foot. And now I will touch the screen. I'm going to move that needle position to the right. And I know that ahead of time I found that the 1.5 stitch width was the perfect position. And notice when I roll the needle down, it's just outside that dashed line that's in the graphics, and that is your perfect scant 1/4 inch. Now you're ready to start sewing. Ahead of time, I have pre-sewn 2 pieces together, and what I have done is placed them right sides together and matched up all 4 corners. I have sewn from the inside out and stopped 1/4 inch from the outside edge. Then you'll notice that I have, after I have pressed the seam open, you'll notice that there is an opening at the end. Remember, I stopped 1/4 inch from the end, and that's a very important part of this process. I've also done it on the other half of the block, so I have the 2 seams already sewn ahead of time. Now we're going to complete that center star. To match the center intersection, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert this pin 1/4 inch from the outside edge, right on the seam line. Then I'm going to go to the bottom piece. To get that perfect match on the center intersection of the star, what I'm going to do is insert the pin right on the seam line 1/4 inch from the edge through the top, and then I'm going to repeat that on the bottom. Then the next thing I'm going to do is leave that pin standing straight to secure that intersection, and then I'm going to put another pin in front of that one. Make sure I have my edges lined up here, and then I will remove that standing pin. Now I should have that perfect match at the beginning. Now I'm going to move these 2 corner pieces right side together, matching up the corner, and I'm going to insert a pin 1/4 inch from the edge. Remember that I'm going to stop sewing at that point. Then I'll repeat and do the same thing on the other end. Insert that pin 1/4 inch from the edge, through the top, and through the bottom. Match the edges and flip that pin back. Now we'll take it to the sewing machine. Then I'm going to roll the needle down, drop the presser foot, and there's a feature on this machine where I can fix that stitch just by simply touching the reverse button, and it'll make a couple of stitches to set that stitch. Then I will put a stiletto in my right hand and control the fabric in front of the presser foot and sew that seam. Make sure that all of my seams are laying flat so I don't have one of them flipping in the wrong direction. Sew over that pin so I don't hurt anything. Then when I get to the next one, remember I want to stop just in front of that needle or that pin that's holding it in place. I don't want to sew beyond that point. Touch the reverse button, fix the stitch, and I'm ready to go to the next step. After you finish sewing the seam, I always press my seams open. How I do that is I first finger press everything on the wrong side first, and then I go to the right side. Now you have a chance to look at that perfect intersection right in the middle. See how nice a match that is? Now when I spread this apart, you will again see that where I stopped sewing at the beginning, on all 4 sides we have that same opening, and that's going to make it easier to insert the next part of the block. Next I'm going to show you how to make the corner units. Remember I told you at the beginning of the program that the ears are removed for easy matching. What I'm going to do is lay out the 3 parts that will make that corner unit so that you can see how they're related to each other. Right sides together, I'm going to match this corner edge right up here. Make sure that everything is perfectly matched. My first stitches that I sew are always sewn on an anchor cloth. I do that so that the beginning stitches on my patchwork are as strong as the center stitches sewn. Using the stiletto, I will guide the patchwork up in front of the needle plate, guiding my fabric under the presser foot with the stiletto. My fingers are too big to get a perfect match up there, so if I use the stiletto, I can control my fabric so nicely. And controlling to the very last stitch. That way I don't have an uneven seam at the beginning and the end. Now when I'm doing a large quilt, I would chain sew a whole bunch of these, but because I'm just doing one block, I will sew off onto the anchor cloth. Clip that curve, and then I will take a look, see that everything's perfect. I will now finger press that seam open on the wrong side first, and then I will go to the right side and I will finger press that one open. The next thing I want to do is to remove the ear on one side of this unit. So I'll clip this one off, just the one, not both of them. Now I'm going to match this point with the ear that I've left on, and notice that I have that perfect match on this end. Again, taking advantage of the fact that I have removed the ears. Remember how I said to control your fabric with the stiletto so that you have a perfect start at the beginning and the end. I like to work with 2 anchor cloths at the sewing machine at all times. Sew off onto that, clip the thread, and we have our first corner unit completed. See how nice that looks? Again, finger pressing on the wrong side first, and then going to the right side. See how nice and flat that lays? One important part of this unit, and I want to point it out right here, is this intersection right here is 1/4 of an inch from this edge and this edge, not from the point. The distance would be greater if you went from the point. Next, we're going to remove those ears just by trimming them off. I like to work with a small scissor at the sewing machine. Then before I would actually sew the unit into the center of the block, I will press it with an iron, and I like to work with steam on the right side and the wrong side. I am going to sew this unit into the corner of the star that I made in the beginning, and I'm going to put them right sides together. With the unit still right sides together, what I'm going to do is flip this point of the star back and get it out of the way. Now when I sneak this up, what I want to do is match this seam line. Remember where I left that 1/4 inch seam allowance open. I want to match that point with this intersection right here. So place them right sides together. I'll pick it up, and with that still folded, I'll insert a pin. That's if I can get a hold of it, and hold that in place, still folded back. Now what I'm going to do is show you the other side of the block. What I want to do is show you how to match the other point of this seam. Notice how there's a little ear hanging over the edge here. The blunt edge here matches that and fills it out. Turn it the other way, insert a pin to hold it in place. Now the anchor cloth is still under the sewing machine, ready to sew, and I'll guide it up to the presser foot with the stiletto, and we'll sew that seam following the edge of the piece with the edge of the presser foot, continually guiding the fabric with the stiletto. Now what I'm going to do is sew right over that intersection right there. Most Y seams, they have you stop right there, and sometimes you end up with a hole in the block. I'm going to sew right over that intersection all the way off to the end. I can cut the thread, lift the presser foot, and let's see if we have a match. Turn it right side out. We have a perfect match. See how this seam line here perfectly matches this point right here. The next thing I'm going to do is readjust this point right here. And now I'm going to go out to this side. Remember how we matched up the other one? Making sure this edge here matches. We'll put a pin to hold that one in place. Now let's go up here and take a look at what we have. This is the point now where I'm going to start sewing up here, sew across to the end, and that will give you that perfect Y seam. So we'll start out again on the anchor cloth, and we'll move right up to that point, making sure that the ends of the fabric are laying down, and see how we went across that intersection, again preventing that little hole that sometimes would happen if you didn't sew across that intersection. This is a very, very strong corner now, and continue sewing off, and we'll cut the thread. We have just completed our first Y seam. See how perfect that is? Ahead of time, I have pre-made some of the corner units to fill out this corner block. You would just continue doing that same process of putting this one in and just continue around the block. When I look over here to my left, you'll see what the intersection looks like after this seam was sewn. See how this is 1/4 of an inch from the point. That's very important that you end up with that. Also, I want to point out that it's important to work on a design wall because each of these blocks are related to each other. This one connects here and to the two upper corner pieces to complete that center star. So the next thing now, after all of the points are put on, I would like to show you what the back side of that block looks like. Close up, this is what your back side would look like. These seams are all pressed open. Again, your 1/4 inch from the edge is very visible right here. But I've done something different in the center part. Notice how I have pressed this seam into the center. And on each one of these, you'll see where this stitching line has crossed over, and that's what made that perfect point on the right side. The next thing I'm going to do is to attach this block to two of them that are already connected, and I'll take it off the design wall so that I make sure that I have the perfect match. I'll twist this around, and now I have this matching here and here. When I pin these together, I want to make sure that this intersection and this one are connected, as well as these seams right in here. And I'll show you how I pin that. So we'll put them right sides together. What I'm going to do is I'll turn it so that it's easy for me to insert the pins. I will insert the pin right at this point, from this point right here, and then I'll go to the bottom one and I'll insert this one right here. And don't forget to leave that pin standing. And on the front side of that, I'll put the second pin to hold that intersection in place and remove that pin. When I sew this seam now, I'm going to want to sew right over that point, and that's what will give me the perfect point on the right side of the quilt. Repeating that process, I'm going to insert a pin on the seam line here through the top and again through the bottom. Leave that center pin standing and another one alongside it. And one last pin. This is how you are going to match all of your seams, whether you're putting the individual blocks together or connecting the rows. See how I leave that pin standing? Do this. And you might feel more comfortable also pinning the beginning and the end of the row. I don't always do that when I'm sewing at home, but we'll just insert that pin. And this time I'm going to drop the presser foot down and guide the fabric with the stiletto. Remove that pin so I don't sew over it. You try to avoid sewing over pins if you can. I'm going to pull this pin out just far enough so I miss it. Remember, I want to sew over this intersection right here. Gently pull the pin almost out. What's really nice is that that foot is transparent right in front there a little bit, so I can see where I'm going. Continue on. Slide this pin out a little ways. Pretty easy stuff to do. Remember how I said in the beginning, all skill levels can create this block. And if there's something that you've missed in the construction or aren't quite sure of, all of the complete instructions are in the color book that comes with the pattern. So there'll be nothing that you'll wonder about when you're putting it together. Okay, let's take a look and see what we have. It's always fun to see how good we've done from the right side. We'll take a look. Wow, perfect, right on points. And when they're perfect, I like to make a big deal about it and show. See how this is right across that point? This one is matched perfectly there and there. The next thing I'm going to do now is turn it to the back side and show you how I press this seam. Just like most of the other seams, I'm going to finger press that seam open. And I'm quite aggressive when I do that. You can actually hear me scratching the fabric when I do this. And I do take all the time to finger press every seam before I press in the with the iron, because that way you prevent wells in your seam line. So from the wrong side and then to the right side. I won't show you how to sew the rows together because that process is the same as sewing the block together. It's just a repeat of that. After you have all of your rows together, then you'll simply attach your inside and outside borders. Then the fun part begins and you are ready to quilt this project. Now the fun part begins. We're ready to do the quilting on the block, and that's just as easy. We have come up with a way to quilt this with a continuous line of stitching through the center of the star. And I follow across that center seam, continue on around, and you make kind of like a crazy 8 going all through the pattern, and it's a very nice way to finish off the block. Then the diamonds in the background is also just around each of the diamonds with a continuous line quilting design. I hope that you've enjoyed this segment that is inspired by Shar. Join us next time when I show you how to make more star variations with the same two shapes.
Inspired by Shar is sponsored by Brother. Featured in Shar's show is the Quattro, Creativity ×4, embroidery, sewing, quilting, and crafting. The Quattro 6000D brings you 100 brilliant, unprecedented, new and improved features. The cabinetry used in this show is by Tracy's Tables, offering a complete line of tables, carts, and shelves custom-made to fit your specific needs. Visit them at tracystables.com. Olfa. There's an Olfa tool for every job. Rowenta. Irons for every need. So unique. Manufacturers of innovative products for sewing, quilting, and beading.